Hi, my name is Luke. Welcome back to another video on this channel. I'm going to start a new series today where we use the highs and lows to create a profitable breakout strategy. I'll probably break this up into 3 shorter videos rather than one really long video. First, let's have a quick explanation of what it is that we're planning to do. So I'll be showing you step by step how to find the highest and lowest prices using an X amount of bars for the current symbol. Then we use these prices to enter buy positions if price breaks the high of the range, and also sell positions if price breaks the low of the range. This is very simple, and we will also use the stop loss and take profit in points. We will also add additional filters so that we don't just trade every breakout on the chart. Okay, so without wasting any more of your time, let's get started. First, click the IDE icon at the top of your chart. This will open the meta editor. Then we click New, choose Expert Advisor from Template. We give the file a name. I'll call mine Prev High-Low Breakout EA. When you've named your file, click Next, Next, and Finish. Okay, so this is our new Expert Advisor. Now let's quickly clean up the template. I'll keep the properties at the top, but you can delete them or you can alter them however you want and set your own copyright details. Remove all the comment lines as we don't need them, and I also like to adjust my curly brackets like this. Okay, so first of all, we want to include the C-Trade class because we will use an object to open and close the positions later. To do this, we use trade/trade.mqh. Let's quickly compile this. Now we need to add some inputs to our EA. The first input we need is a magic number. This will be a static input as we don't need to optimize this input in the strategy tester. So we set it to static input and the type is a long variable. We will call it in magic number, so input magic number. We then predefine this with a random number, and we also comment magic number to make it look cleaner in the input section of the EA. The next input will be the lot size. This will also be a static input, but this time of type double. We name it imp lot size and we set this to a very small lot size like 0.01. We also add a comment lot size. The next input will be for the number of bars we want to search for the highs and lows. Choose an input of type integer and let's name it imp bars. We set it to a default value of, let's say, 20 bars, and we also add the comment bars for high low. Next, we also want to add a stop loss and take profit. We use an input of type integer because the stop loss and take profit will be in points. We call them imp stop loss and imp take profit. For the stop loss, let's use a default value of 200 points, and we also add a comment stop loss in points. And we want to have the option to have no stop loss, so 0 means no stop loss. For the take profit, let's set it to 0 by default, and let's also add a comment take profit in points. Again, 0 equals off, meaning that we do not wish to use one. That's it for the input section. We can add more later when needed. Let's now compile. Perfect, we have no warnings and no errors. Now before we move on to the onInit function, we need to declare a few global variables. These variables are used in multiple functions. So the first one is of type double called high. This will be our high level, and by default we will set it to 0. The next one is also type double, and we will call this one low. We also set this to 0. Now let's save the current tick in a variable so that we have information about the current price. So to do this, we declare 2 variables of the MQL tick type. The first one is called current tick and the second one is called previous tick. We need these variables to detect if we cross a line, for example, and the last global variable will be an instance of the C-Trade class, and we'll call this object trade. That's now it for the global variables. So now let's take a look at the onInit function. So here what we should always do first is check the user inputs, because obviously the user can enter in wrong values, and if they do, then we don't want the EA to start. So in the onInit function, we will use a Boolean type function which can only return true or false. If it returns false, then we just return input parameters incorrect. Now, in order to check the user inputs, we will need to write a new function below the onTick function and then write some if statements inside of it where we can check the user inputs for each function. So again, we make this function a boolean and we name it check inputs. It has to be the exact name that we used in the onInit function like this. We don't use any parameters, and at the end of the function we want to return true. Now we can add the if statements to check the user inputs. We need to do this for the magic number, the lot size, the stop loss and the take profit, but we will start with the magic number. So we say if int magic number is less than or equal to 0, then we want to print a message that we have a wrong input. So for this we can use the alert function. We write wrong inputs, magic number, and the reason is it's less or equal to 0. This way the user knows what value is wrong, and we also want to return false so the EA doesn't load on the chart. We can then copy and paste this and then edit them where needed. So for the lot size, we say if lots is less than or equal to 0, then we also want to print a message. We will print wrong inputs, lot size is less than or equal to 0. Now for the imp bars, we change it to 0. So if it's less than 0, we return false. For the stop loss, we've already said that it can be 0, which means it's switched off. So we just print a message saying that the stop loss is less than 0. Our input take profit can also be 0. So again, we just print a message saying that take profit is less than 0. Now, if any of these if statements here are false, the EA knows to instantly remove itself from the chart. If they are all true, then the EA may continue. And in the onInit function, the first thing we want to do is to set the magic number from our inputs, as we will need this later in the trade object to look for the positions of our EA and to close the positions, for example. So let's add a comment here, and then we pass trade.setExpertMagicNumber. And then inside we add our imp magic number. Let's now go down to the onInit function. For now, we don't actually need it, so we will just decrease the size of it, and this will obviously keep things clean, but we don't want to delete it as we can use this later on. So now let's start working in the onTick function. Before we do anything, we want to save the current tick, so let's quickly write a comment, get current tick. Now before we get the current tick, we want to set the current tick to the previous tick, so the previous tick equals the current tick. Now we can get the current tick using symbol info tick. We use the current symbol and our current tick. If this function call returns false, then we print a message to the user letting them know that there is some kind of error fetching the current tick. And then we also want to return. Let's compile again. We can see there's still no errors and still no warnings, which is perfect. And before we continue, we need a few custom functions. We will write them under the check user inputs function. We need a count open positions function, a normalized price function, and the close positions function. Let's start with the count open positions function. So first we need two parameters, count buy and count sell. We will set them both to 0 at the start. We then get the total positions at the current time. And then we simply loop through all the open positions. We then get the position ticket. We then select the position. and we then check if the selected position has our magic number. If that's the case, we then increase the counters for the buy and sell. That's all we need for this function. We can now move on to the normalized price function. We will use this function to normalize the price for the stop loss and the take profit. Again, we just have one input as a reference, which is the price. We get the tick size of the current symbol. And then we normalize the price to the tick size and the digits of the current symbol. And now for the close positions function, we will use this function to close all open positions, and we specify here with all buy and sell. We will use numbers 0, 1 and 2. 0 means that we close all positions, 1 means that we only close the buy positions, and 2 means we close the sell positions. So first we get the total number of positions. We then loop through all the open positions and get the ticket. We select the position. Then we check for the magic number. and depending on the parameter or buy sell, we either continue with the next position or we close the position. If the operation fails, we also print a message for the user, failed to close position. And that's basically it for these three functions. Now we can go back to the onTick function and we can start using these functions. Before we continue though, let's compile. Again, there's no errors or warnings, which is perfect. So let's now write a comment, count open positions. First we declare two variables, count buy and count sell. Now we can use our count open positions function in an if statement. We pass the count buy and count sell variables. If this function fails, then we just return. And now we know if we have an open buy position or an open sell position. Okay, so now we want to check for a buy position. We write a comment, check for buy position, and then we can use a simple if statement. The first condition that needs to be true is our count buy. This has to be 0, meaning that we don't already have an open buy position, and our high variable cannot be equal to 0. So we just want to make sure that we have set this high level. And next we can use our previous tick.askPrice because the ask price is relevant for a buy position. Previous tick.askPrice has to be below this high level, and the current tick.askPrice has to be above the high level. This will mean that we have a break of this price level. Then if this is true, we want to open a buy position, but for now we will just add a print statement, open buy position, and we will just use this to test our conditions in the strategy tester. For the sell position, we can just copy and paste this to check for the sell positions. But this time our count sell needs to be 0, our low should not be equal to 0, and the previous tick.bid is greater than our low level, and the current tick.bid is less than or equal to our low level. If this is true, then we want to open a sell position. Now, before we can test our logic in the strategy tester, we need to get the current high and low of our current symbol. So let's add another comment, calculate the high low. To set our high, we will use the iHigh function. This will give you the highest price of a specific candle, and then we specify our symbol, the current period. For the shift or the index of the bar we want to look at, we will use the iHighest function. Again, we specify the symbol, the period, and for the mode, we use mode high. This will just compare all the highs of each bar, and then we will get back the index of the highest bar. We then pass our int bars input, and we want to start at bar 0, which is the current bar. We can then copy this for the low. This time we want to use the iLow function, and then the iLowest function and mode low. Everything else stays the same. This will calculate the highest and lowest price over the last X amount of bars. And now before we can test this in the visual tester, let's just add another function to draw these values on the chart. So we will use a horizontal line for this, or a trend line. But first of all, compile again. We want to call this function draw objects. Now let's go down and write this function below the check user inputs function. So this will be a void function as it has no return value. Let's write the name of the function draw object, and we will not have any parameters for this function because the high and the low variable is a global variable, meaning that we can access these variables from any of our functions. So first, let's start with the high object. Before we go any further, we want to delete the object so we can make sure that we have a new object with the current high value on the chart. The name is high, and now we can call the object create function. We add null, which means the current chart or symbol. We add our name, high, and now the type of the object we want to draw is a trend line. We need to specify the sub window, which is 0. This means that we want it on the main chart and not a sub chart like the RSI. We also need a time coordinate. So for this, we declare another variable above of type daytime, and we calculate the time using the iTime function. We pass the symbol, the current period, and the shift will be our input bars. This will give us the open time of the bar, and then we store this time in our variable. Now we can use it here. The second coordinate for the first point is our high price, and the second coordinate we can use the time current function. And again, our high price. This will create our trend line. Now to make it easier to see, we can also increase the width. So we use object set integer, null, object property width, and we set this to 2. We can then also choose a color for the trend line. Again, we use object set integer, null, object property color, and then choose a color. Any color will do, but I'll use black. This will now create a simple trend line for the high price, and then we will just copy and paste this below for the low price. Again, we change this to low, then copy the low text itself and replace all of the highs, or all of the text that says high. Everything else stays the same. Let's compile this one more time. We don't have any errors or warnings. So now we can do our first check to see if it's working and if we detect the high and low prices. Click view at the top of your chart, select the strategy tester. We want to run a visual test, so make sure the visual mode is ticked. Choose any symbol. I have Euro USD. Select your preferred time frame, and we will test with every tick. Then press start. All we want to do is make sure that we can actually see the highs and lows on the chart. Also in the journal, we should be able to see some comments. So first, let's clear the journal so that we can start with a fresh one. And now we can see that whenever we cross these lines, we get open buy position and open sell position comments. We can see that we are detecting the highest price over the last X amount of bars and the lowest price over the last X amount of bars. Next, we would change this print statement to actually open a buy or sell position. But we will save that for part 2 of this video series. And we will add the code to open buy positions here. And we will also add additional components so that we can get a profitable backtest for, say, the last 10 to 15 years with this strategy. That is it for this video. If you have enjoyed this and if this video has helped you in any way, please leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. If you have any questions or recommendations for ways that we can improve this strategy, please feel free to drop a comment, and I always try my best to respond to all comments as quickly as possible. Other than that, you can reach out to me via my website. You will find a link in my channel description, and I'll also leave a link below in the video description. You can also message me on Telegram. But for now, trade safe, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.